Now, the one thing I did see that my observation is, and this is, observation in this case just means seeing newspaper articles about it, that I started seeing in recent years that I never saw before, is children, if you want to call them that, who are like in their 30s suing their non-custodial fathers to
Yeah,
pay for grad school and stuff like that. And actually, judges are saying, yeah, he should have to pay for your grad school, even though you're in your 30s. Like,
yeah,
what the heck is that?
yeah. Or well, what they should do is, force them to pay for law school, and
Right.
then the whole system will be completely self-financing. No, it's. I mean, basically, the child support system is a racket. It's a system of child. I mean, people call it. I've called it this: child kidnapping and extortion. It's judicial child kidnapping and extortion. You seize control of someone's parents or someone's children, and then you force them to pay for it. I mean, if that were done by if a gangster did that, of course it would be considered a crime, and yet judges do it all the time. So once you've started this, once you've legitimized a system of extortion, why not carry it elsewhere? Why not? I've got examples in my first book about how 45-year-old children, so called, collecting child support from their elderly parents, or I mean, it's just amazing.
How is
Yeah,
that even possible?
you tell me. Elderly men raped by women and made pregnant by them, and then suing them for child support, or young boys who are forced
Yeah, well,
who
I
have
have
sex.
heard, like, I've definitely heard where, like, minor, high school boys are, raped, by statutory rape, at least by their teachers, and then they get hit with
Yes,
child support to pay their
yes,
rapist child support. It's
yes.
totally insane.
It's
The
absolutely
the
insane. And
idea the idea that someone who is like your rapist, the person who raped you gets custody of the kid, coming out
well,
of it
it's it's the it's the old principle about one should never profit from your crime, and yet that's
right.
precisely what they allow them to do, is to make money from criminal acts. No,
Yeah, and it's really it's really kind of it's insane, and it's one of these things. There's a group of people out there. I don't know if you've ever heard of them. They're called the Men Going Their Own Way movement. Have you ever heard of these
oh
guys?
yes,
The Big Tau. Their basically thing is they take the book like yours, and what they would just say is, see, all guys should read this and never get married.
yeah.
Don't have sex with women. Stay as far away from women as you can. Try to avoid this. And I don't know that that's a niche, obviously, but I do think it's interesting. Helen Smith wrote a book called Men on Strike, that men are kind of like calculating that, man, this is
Yeah.
like not something that that we want to get involved in. Let's just stay far away from this. And and then you hear the complaints in the church. Certainly, where are the good men? Why don't they want to commit? It's like, well, there is a sense in that the incentive structure is a little bad in some
To say the
respects.
least.
And
Yeah.
I remain an advocate for marriage, and you're married, I believe. But nevertheless, it is it is affecting things, and affecting people. And my hypothesis has always been that they're never going to allow any sort of male birth control to be approved.
Mm,
That, because you can
right,
believe, once there's like the pill for men, he's never going to forget to take it. You know what I mean?
right.
And so right now, today's system, really does greatly empower women to kind of control fertility and pregnancy. And I think there's not going to be any desire to allow men to basically do the same thing on their end. But it'll be interesting to see that. You would think that would be like a massive market, and that every pharma company would be trying to develop some version of the automatic oral birth control for men.
Yeah. No, it's
Um,
amazing. I mean, as you say, these MGTOW men. I mean, if you look at their videos, there's thousands of these videos on
mhm.
YouTube, and the number of viewers is just astounding. I mean, the hundreds of thousands. Some of them have viewers in the millions. All these men concluding that, as you say, and then these, again, the conservatives, the social conservatives, wonder why the birth rate
Right.
is in free fall, why nobody's having children.
Right.
Again, you just wonder where is the disconnect here?
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, forget even the government. I've often observed, I think the churches themselves directly underwrite divorce. if you nothing makes a pastor's eyes light up like talking about the single mom that they're helping, and it's like there are all these like single moms, but they never ask. They never seem to. It's always a no questions asked assistance to any single mothers. He could dump your husband, go to the church,
Yes.
say he was emotionally abusive or something. They're instantly going to start giving you stuff. They're going to start giving you money. It's like, they're actually underwriting it. And, it's interesting. A former pastor of mine actually became disabled in an accident. And within a year and a half, his wife divorced him. I looked her up right before this conversation. It looks like she's engaged to somebody else now and all that. And even that most outrageous case seems to was largely swept under the rug by that community. They didn't talk about it very much. They didn't do this. She's still got people who are, friends with her and like provide her with emotional support. And while all this was going on, and it's just like, even a pastor's wife who dumps her disabled husband and like is having affairs and all this, and they won't even like. It's just like, well, it's brokenness or it's something, and it's just like gone. It's like we're not going to talk about that. We're not going to talk about that. We're going to have another sermon beating men up for what they're not doing right. And it's even when it's something like that so flagrant happens that nobody can not see it, it doesn't seem to do it. Before we, so there's the mechanics of this sort of that's sort of like that kind of the traditional kind of men's rights kind of view of divorce. But the book, The New Politics of Sex, again, is your book. I think one of the things that it really does is it makes the point that a lot of this is driven by a desire to expand the power of the state and reduce or eliminate the scope of the private sphere. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah. The second book is about the broader picture, and I do talk about that a lot, about the expanding role of the state and how the sexual revolution in all of its manifestations has had that effect. Divorce, after I wrote my first book on divorce, I realized that there was a pattern going on, that what I was seeing in the divorce industry was only a small part, well, a significant part, but still only a part, the worst part, but still only a part of a larger phenomenon that was taking place in the sexual revolution. And that was there were a number of factors, and there's a number of themes in that second book, which developed those themes. I realized that a large part of it was driven by ideology. That what we were seeing was a new political divorce and the connected phenomena were not just driven by greedy lawyers or venal judges, or it was driven by ideology, kind of neo-Marxist, but not even that. It was feminist ideology was something new. It's not just neo-Marxism. It's a new kind of ideology that uses sexuality and exploits sexuality as a form of political power. And much the way communism did, but even more so, even more intrusively, even more, in some ways, even more totalitarian way, in the sense that with even less respect for privacy. So feminist ideology was one thing that I saw, and I've seen, and since then, things like the accusations one sees in divorce courts, like domestic violence accusations and child abuse accusations, have since been spread and used elsewhere. For example, in the universities, where we've had this outbreak of, rape accusations that are almost always concocted against male students in the universities. We've had the phenomenon of Me Too, which is again involves accusations of sexual impropriety, quasi-criminal accusations in many instances. So the patterns, the modus operandi that are created in the divorce courts have also been used elsewhere in society for similar purposes. It's not just divorce. And all of these involve, they all often involve the judiciary and connected industries like the welfare system, the social service agencies, and that sort of thing. The bureaucratic government agencies that no one pays attention to. Mm-hmm. That, like you say, journalists don't investigate, scholars don't investigate. They're dreary. They're not much fun to investigate. So everybody ignores them, and yet they are wreaking a tyranny that is unbelievable. So that's another feature. The other kind of theme of the second book, which I try to develop, is the idea that, like every revolution, the sexual revolution promises freedom and delivers authoritarianism. In other words, it promises sexual freedom, right? Woodstock hippies and hair and, Oh Calcutta and all of that stuff that was going on in the late 60s and 70s, sexual freedom, cast out your old ethics and so forth. It was supposed to bring liberation. It was supposed to bring freedom. Everybody was supposed to be free and happy. And yet, the result of this now that we are seeing from the 90s on especially is not freedom, it's authoritarianism. What they did was it's kind of like the old slogan of the French Revolution: no freedom for the enemies of freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You first of all, you remove the old controls on sexuality, controls that were provided by religion, by the local community, by the extended family, the traditional constraints, the traditional ways of controlling sexuality. You remove those. But of course, no society can exist in sexual chaos. It's not possible. So what do? You replace those old constraints with new constraints. But the new constraints are driven by ideology, by feminist ideology, Marxist ideology. And the old constraints were enforced by the church, by the community, by the family, by the friends and so forth, enforced informally, non-coercively. The new constraints on sexuality are enforced by the state, by the gendarmerie, enforced by the courts, enforced by the social workers, enforced by universities acting as courts and police. So the old constraints were moral, were social, were peer pressure, but they were not coercive. The new constraints are ideological, and they are enforced with handcuffs and prison sentences and so forth. And so that's what we've done. We've replaced traditional sexual morality with political ideology. A whole series of gender crimes, sex crimes that nobody had ever heard of before. Sexual harassment, sexual assault, sexual, very vague oftentimes, sexual misconduct, sexual abuse, things nobody's ever heard of. Nobody knows what these mean. Even domestic violence can be defined in terms of insults or verbal abuse or psychological abuse. What does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. It means that you can.
Well, I was just going
It
to
means
say
you could stretch the accusation to fit whatever person you want to accuse or whatever act you want to accuse.